org. And it's just some typical vocabulary words when you're talking about priesthood and religious life. And perhaps some of them you know already, but perhaps some of them you're like, I'm never really clear what is perpetual vows, what are temporary vows, what's the difference between a nun and a sister, all right? So there's some great vocabulary words. How do you become a priest? How do you become a sister or a brother? It's those steps on the way. Like for priesthood, it's a little bit more familiar to us because it's more publicly viewed. You usually can see it on your diocesan website, or before COVID, we had the privilege of going to the cathedral or the seminary to pray and participate as the men went through the various steps, eventually being ordained to a transitional deacon and then priest. But with religious life, that it's not as public, all right? And so understanding what is the difference between a postulant and then a novice and so forth, these would be important for you to become familiar with. And why? It goes to a credibility factor. Don't tell someone you know everything about vocations if you're not familiar with the language. It is, however, okay to say, that's a great question. I always get confused between the two. I don't know the answer, but I'm going to get back to you on that, right? So always be honest when you're talking to someone about the different steps when it comes to vocation work. This is always my favorite one, the difference between a sister and a nun. They are not, in fact, the same, right? So nuns live in a monastery. Nuns are, often cloistered. Sisters are probably with the type of religious women that we most encounter, all right, in our everydayness, in our parishes, if we still are blessed to have them living with us. But perhaps some are working on the chancery level. But that is the difference between sisters and nuns.